Hello. How's lunch? Good. Yep. Okay, right. So thank you to everyone. I just want to give a big thanks to everyone who contributed to our scholarship fund this year at the National Bike Summit. The scholarship program is critical to making the summit more accessible. So we were able to provide 11 scholarships because of your generosity. So thank you so much. Well, I'm really excited to be presenting our first speaker for lunch. Toks Omishakin is a longtime advocate promoting the connections for transportation, health, and livable communities. At the local level, he worked in the mayor's office developing complete streets policies and the Healthy Living Initiative for Nashville. At the state level, he now serves as the Deputy Commissioner and Chief of Environment and Planning for Tennessee DOT, where he leads the activities of the divisions of Environment, Long-Range Planning, Project Planning, and Multimodal Transportation Resources. And at the national level, he serves as a board member for America Bikes, and today, America Walks. I thought it reformed. I didn't even know. We need another bicycling organization. For America Walks. And today, he is here in his role as the vice chair to AASHTO's Council on Active Transportation. Thanks so much, Toks, for being with us.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? I have not had a chance to eat lunch yet, so I'm starving just looking at everybody eat. But once I get through this, I'll try to swallow. Did you call it a Mexican, what'd you call it? Wedding cookie. Never had one before. Looking forward to, the rest of you will hate them, so there'll be some left for me. So looking forward to trying that. I'm pretty excited to be here. I was here, I think maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and it was nowhere as exciting as this has been. I came to dinner last night, and I saw a guy going to heaven because he gave his car away. He had like an angel suit on, if those of you who were here for dinner. So that's what you got to do to make it to heaven, is to give your car away and you'll get angel wings. That was pretty cool to see. Some people like that. So as Bill mentioned, I'm here for multiple reasons. Wearing several different hats. One, I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Tennessee DOT, oversee planning, environmental work, multimodal work, but also here as the chair of the AASHTO Task Force on Multimodal Issues, the Multimodal Task Force at AASHTO. Yes, you should clap. And I'm also the vice chair of the council, the Council on Active Transportation at AASHTO. So why are the, yes, please clap. Please clap. And I'm saying please clap because AASHTO has been around for over 100 years, celebrated its centennial in 2014. Its former name prior, I think in 1973, it changed its name from AASHTO. That's literally what it was. You can take from that what you want. And they added the T. They added the T word, transportation, to that, recognizing that they needed to represent more than just the highway side of things. So 1973, that made that change. And it's been a gradual transition, just like most of your state departments of transportation. It's been a gradual transition towards really embracing that T. And as soon as I got to the state, I made it one of my main focuses, one of my main missions, to work with them to see how AASHTO could become more multimodal, because it's probably one of the, or the most influential organization that represents state highway transportation officials in the country. So it's a big deal for them to get to the place where they have a council on active transportation and a multimodal task force. And so that's part of why I'm here today, to talk about that and to talk about some of the things that are happening in Tennessee on the active transportation front. So I already talked about this a little bit. I'll try to get through this quickly because I'm looking forward to seeing my colleagues come up next on the panel. With AASHTO, American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, represents highway transportation departments in all 50 states, District of Columbia, D.C., and Puerto Rico. Represents all modes again. That change happened in 1973. The focus of AASHTO is to the development and operation and maintenance of an integrated national transportation system. And it focuses daily on educating the public and key decision makers about the critical role transportation plays in quality of life and the economy of our nation. So I mentioned this transition that's happening, the change that's happening at AASHTO. We all have org charts in our different places that we work. This one is very sort of convoluted. You just look at it and you don't know what's going on. But this org chart looked very different just a mere 2 years ago, or roughly a year ago. That blue box at the top left corner that you see there says Transportation Policy Forum. Transportation Policy Forum. This is where a big change has been made at AASHTO to become more inclusive and embrace multimodal more closely. Those 6 boxes that you see right on there, that are those light blue boxes, you see aviation, highways and streets, public transportation, water, rail, and again, active transportation is a big part of the change that's been made. And you see a dotted line from that blue box. This policy forum is going to be influencing and informing every other part of AASHTO moving forward to make sure, again, that there's a multimodal focus throughout the organization. Yes. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And I'm excited and glad to be a part of this change that's happening at AASHTO. And very kudos to them. Shannon and Brian, are you here? Possibly, yes. Shannon and Brian, staff from AASHTO, they are the liaisons to this team, working with the state DOTs to help make sure that we stay on task and stay on line. And the person who would actually be doing this presentation is a lady named Leslie Richards. She's the secretary of the Pennsylvania DOT. Anybody from Pennsylvania here? Okay, some Pennsylvania, yeah. So you guys may know Leslie Richards. She's the chair of the Council on Active Transportation. So kudos to you guys. If she's the chair, she better be doing this work in your states, right? Right, okay. So, again, the purpose of the council, without going through all the words on here, really is just to make sure, again, that biking, walking, transit issues are being a focus throughout the agency and throughout our coordination with organizations like NACTO, like AMPO, that those discussions are going on with those agencies, and working with the federal highways as well, and the U.S. DOT to help make that happen. I mentioned this just a second ago. The chair is Leslie Richards, the secretary of the Pennsylvania DOT, myself as vice chair. There's a full council with 1 voting member from each of the 52 representative departments, 2 non-voting members, and a steering committee of 11 members that I and Secretary Richards both sit on. We are working on a strategic plan. A lot of this work, again, is brand new. The focus, without, again, going through all the text that's on here, the focus is going to be, 1, on safety. A lot of people, a lot of organizations, public organizations that you will see, they will say, oh, safety is our #1 priority. We don't want that to just be a talking point. We want to actually have measures that we can align ourselves with to see the needle being moved in a positive direction for active transportation modes across the country. Second is data. Many of us know in our respective states that data is a challenge, having the right amount of data to help in decision making. So what data sets do we need to be looking at and collecting? That's going to be a focus. And technology and project delivery are sort of the two other main areas. On the technology standpoint, we're all aware of the onset of autonomous vehicles that are right around the corner, regardless of how much we want to say it's very far off. It is right here, and it's here today. And we want to be a part of the conversation that's happening with the automobile industry to make sure that the active transportation modes are not left out as these advancements are being made with autonomous technology. And yes, yeah. And I forgot the fourth one there I had just in my mind just a second ago. But just to keep moving, so my peers can come up here. Looking ahead, we're going to have our first really big major meeting in Spokane, Washington. So if you're nearby, if you're on the West Coast, if you want to come hang out with us, it's not a public meeting, but if you want to come chat with us, if you live in a nearby state, just to see what we're doing as this council takes off, you're welcome to. It's in July 17th through the 20th, again in Spokane, Washington. So I mentioned the staff earlier, Shannon and Brian, they're here. If you want to see them or if you want to chat with me, glad to do that right afterwards. But real quickly, Tennessee. I talked about this, so bear with me a second. I talked about this in a session earlier this morning. We're excited in Tennessee because a lot of change is happening. You may not know that Tennessee is one of the more bicycle-friendly states in the country, especially leading the way in the South. We have over 40 bicycle-friendly communities awarded by the League. Thank you, League. If you compare us to other states that are larger, yeah, clap for Tennessee. When you compare us to states like Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, states that are a lot larger, we're actually leading the way. Complete streets policies, bicycle-friendly communities, all those things we're doing. And a lot of that is happening because of a major demographic shift in our state. Not only are advocates pushing us to do more, but the shifts that are happening population-wise are really helping us think about this more. The fact that we're going to have 2 million more people in Tennessee by 2040. We're almost 7 million people today. We're going to add 2 million more people. And a lot of that growth is happening in urban areas throughout our state. So we know multimodal options are going to be essential as that growth happens. And again, the senior population, 65 and over, is going to double within that 20-year period. I see somebody raising their hand back there. Are you already 65 and over and hoping to be around in 25 years? I don't know. But I'm hoping to be around in 25 years. Bill, I know we're fast spent on time possibly here, but okay. So the evolution of cycling in Tennessee, 17 years ago, I was the first city bike ped coordinator in the state of Tennessee. I was glad to just get a mile of bike lane. What you see on the left side of your screen there is what we used to do, and we used to be doing happy dances everywhere. Like, yay, we got a bike lane. We have finally made the transition to more protected bike lanes. They're happening all over the state of Tennessee, and a big part of the reason why that's happening is people like you in this room. The advocates are pushing us to get to that next level, and a lot of the innovation is coming from local government, from city government up to the state, saying we need to get on board with these things, and it's happening. Excited to say it's happening in Tennessee. We're doing things like we're changing our design guidelines and our manuals that guide decision-making across the state. You know, if you want to make this happen at your state DOT or at the local level, city government level, number one, you have to have a policy, whether it be a legislative policy, a mayor's policy, some kind of executive order, something that says here's what we're going to be doing henceforth. But the next step is really the manuals and the guidelines that the engineers and the planners use for decision making needs to be changed, needs to be updated. They need to be updated to embrace multimodal options, and we're doing that in Tennessee. Our scoping manuals, our design guidelines, we're working on changing those right now. We're in the middle of that process. A quick example of that, this chart, you probably can't see it too clearly, but as the speeds go up and as the volume on the roadways go up, we're putting into our standards, we're saying you have to have more protected facilities. So you can't just do a regular bike lane anymore. As the volume goes up, as the speeds go up, we're making sure that our engineers our engineers are having the tools they need to design roadways in an appropriate way. They're coming to get us from Mars, or is that Russia?
It is only a test.
Okay, okay. That would happen during my presentation. Great timing. Yeah. I thought the Russians were coming to get us. Yeah. All right. So, okay. So, if you want to come back, dial back in real quick. So, if you want to institutionalize bicycle and pedestrian change in your community, I think policy is a very important place to start. But also just your processes within your respective departments, whether it be state or city level. At the NEPA phase in Tennessee, we're making sure that the screening of projects in the NEPA process looks at multimodal. In the project scoping phase, we're making sure the same thing happens. Reviewing of resurfacing projects, that's where a lot of opportunity lies in your respective states to do road diets and to add bike lanes. We're making sure that as we're reviewing those, we're putting those in place. Road safety audits. Our HSIP funds, a lot of you are probably familiar with HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Funds. We get $40 million in Tennessee. We've set aside the exact percentage of pedestrian fatalities in Tennessee. We've set aside the exact percentage of that for the HSIP funds to go towards making pedestrian and bicycling improvements. Clap. Yes. And some of you may be familiar with the STEP program with Federal Highways. STEP program with Federal Highways, I'll just go back real quick, that's identifying countermeasures for pedestrians in your respective states. We're partnering with Federal Highways on that. And I'll end with this. So I talked about policy change, talked about process change, but one of the most significant ways that you can make the changes happen in your communities that you want to see is no doubt funding. It's dollars. That's where you can make the rubber really hit the road. And in Tennessee, we have $70 million set aside annually for projects that impact walking, biking, and transit in our state. $70 million. Mind you, again, Tennessee. I said, not California, not New York. We have a population of less than 7 million people, but we've had leadership in place that understand the importance of multimodal provisions, and they're backing it up with dollars. Look, I'm not saying we're perfect by any means, but we're taking those steps. I'll run through these quickly and I'll end here. CMAQ, we're familiar with this already. In your states, you have CMAQ money. That number is actually different now. It says 35 million. It's about 40 million that we're getting from Federal Highways in Tennessee. The TAP program, again, funds a lot of projects in your state. We get roughly 17.4 million in Tennessee. You can use the money statewide. One of the very unique things that we've done since I've been around for 7 years is we created something called the Multimodal Access Grant, where we've set aside $10 million of gas tax, transportation gas tax money to make walking, biking, transit improvements in the state of Tennessee. You can do the very same thing in your state. It's not a lot of money, but it's a start. And we can do better. We can do more. It's one of the most popular programs we have in our state, this small $10 million pot for bike ped improvements. Rec Trails program, $1.5 million. That's also federal money from Federal Highways. Community Transportation Planning Grants, we set up $1 million to help these smaller communities that don't have planning officials, planning departments in their cities, to help them come up with a plan. Because what we recognize was that oftentimes when we get down the road and we ask people, what do you want to do connectivity-wise, road diet-wise, or bike lane-wise, they don't have a plan. So we're helping communities by creating this planning grant program, $50,000, $100,000 to come up with plans so they can have them, not just sit on the shelf, but when funding comes in place, they're ready to go. Pedestrian Safety Initiative, again, that's what I mentioned about HSIP. We get $40 million in Tennessee. That's to set aside, again, to address walking, biking related issues. And our Department of Health, they're great partners in Tennessee. They've also set aside $1.8 million to help communities across the state address issues related to having a built environment that's more supportive for walking and biking. So if I could leave you with anything, an old adage, it's keep pushing. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. It takes a while to get these changes to happen. This didn't happen overnight in Tennessee. It's taken a while for the DOT to get to this place. AASHTO, they changed their name in 1973 to AASHTO. And they're finally, I think, taking a major, major step and saying a big part of why we're reorganizing the entire organization is because we want to be more focused on multimodal. That's a major step. So just keep pushing and we'll get there. Thank you.
We will keep pushing. Thank you so much for everything you're doing for the people of Tennessee and for the rest of us in AASHTO. We're really thankful. So now I would like to introduce our next excellent panel of speakers. This panel is thinking holistically to build more equitable, healthy, and resilient communities. Our moderator, Charles Brown, and other panelists, please join me on stage and I'll introduce you all. Our moderator, Charles Brown, is the senior researcher with the Alan M. Voorhees Transportation Center. Yes. Sorry, coming from all sides, sorry about that. An adjunct professor at the Edward J. Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, both at Rutgers University. A self-proclaimed street-level researcher, he is a leading voice in encouraging social justice and equity in active transportation. He's often invited to speak at many notable colleges and universities and conferences in the U.S. and abroad. His work has been published in several international journals as well as featured in the New York Times. He has received numerous awards and was recently nominated Advocate of the Year by Streets Blog LA. Yeah, thanks for being here. Dr. Jane Delgado is president and CEO of the National Alliance for Hispanic Health, whose mission is the best health outcomes for all. The Alliance is at the forefront of ensuring quality in health, science-based solutions, and promoting cultural proficiency and linking health and the environment. In 2017, Latino leaders named Dr. Delgado one of the 101 most influential Latinos in the United States. In 2015, she received the FDA Commissioner's Special Citation, the Dr. Harvey Wiley Award, the highest award to a civilian. Thanks so much for being here with us. Dr. Rose Gowen is City Commissioner for the City of Brownsville, Texas. As a commissioner for the Brownsville City Commission since 2009 and a physician of more than 20 years, Dr. Gowen has focused her career on issues related to smart growth, quality of life, and combating of obesity and chronic diseases. Through a collaboration with the University of Texas School of Public Health in Brownsville, Dr. Gowen was instrumental in developing the city's first farmers market, which has been recognized as a model of excellence by the Texas Department of Health and the U.S.-Mexico Border Health Commission. She's also led the initiative to expand Brownsville's rail trail into a citywide network and to create a citywide hike and bike plan and help pass the city's first commercial sidewalk and complete streets resolutions. Fantastic. And took you to get to the bicycle-friendly community status. And last but not least, Harriet Tregoning is the immediate past Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Office of Community Planning and Development at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Her work at HUD encompassed helping states, regions, cities, counties, and towns across the country to build a strong foundation for resilience in the face of a changing climate and for a diverse and prosperous economy based on enhancing community quality of place, economic opportunity, fiscal stability, transportation choice, and affordability. I have to also mention that Harriet was also previously the director of the DC's Department of Planning, where she worked to make DC walkable, bikeable, and an eminently livable, globally competitive, and a thriving city. So thank you for this excellent panel. Thank you for all your great work. Really excited to hear from you.
Thank you, Bill. All right, we're going to get straight to the discussion. I'm a man of action, so let's proceed here. You all have tremendous bios. It's a pleasure to share the stage with you. But I want to kick things off now by having you highlight a few of your projects, either by you or your organization, and sort of speak to how they are connecting to building a more equitable, healthy, and resilient community. Harriet?
Sure. I'll talk about my time in the District of Columbia, where I still actually do different kinds of work. I think the thing I'm most proud about is the pretty intense effort that we made in the district beginning in 2007, 2008 to really bring a lot more bicycle choice here. And not just with investments in infrastructure and what was at the time the nation's largest bike sharing program, but also with the changes that we made in neighborhoods, with zoning and with where the city chose to invest, so that every neighborhood virtually in the city is walkable, with destinations within a short distance, so that people could meet a lot more of their daily needs. I think everyone in this room recognizes that transportation is the second highest household expense. So anything you can do to lower the cost of transportation really gives families and households a lot more choices about how they spend their money and how they build their wealth and how they thrive. This is not an inexpensive place to live, but people really do have here a tremendous number of choices for virtually every trip that they might contemplate taking.
Thank you. Dr. Gower?
Is it on? Okay, so before about 2009, I rarely voted. And it really was because I was a busy physician and didn't really see the pertinence of having to take time out of my day to go and vote. And then I got involved with finding and listening to some of the statistics that were being found in my community, and that was that 1 in 3 of our people are diabetic, and 50% of them don't know it, and up to 70% do not have access to health care. So when I heard those statistics, I realized that I needed to try to make a difference in that. And I realized that there are no vibrant cities filled with sick people. And if my hometown was going to become vibrant, we needed to address health from the economic sector, from the environmental sector, from the health sector, from the business sector, and everything in between. So I'm most proud of forming, together with my strong partners at the School of Public Health, a coalition of people that do work together to create change in our community and are driving change across the Lower Rio Grande Valley.
Awesome. Do you vote now?
I do.
Okay, just checking.
Every single time.
Awesome. Awesome. Dr. Delgado.
I think one of the most important things, one of the most important things to provide people is good information. So what we did is we did a major study at the Healthy Americas Institute at the USC Keck School of Medicine, asking Hispanics, non-Hispanic blacks, and non-Hispanic whites what they thought was integral to their health. What surprised us, what rose to the top, was 45% for non-Hispanic whites, 59% for African Americans, and 63% of Hispanics said bike lanes, sidewalks, and public transportation. That's how they define their health. So part of the importance of that is breaking a stereotype where people think that in African American and Hispanic communities that people don't care about these things. So the data showed it did. And this we just released in December. More important than that, for the last 12 years, and we're an organization, as you should know, we do not accept funding from tobacco, alcohol, or sugar-sweetened beverages. So we're very limited in what we can fund. We fund an activity in communities called Viva tu Vida, Get Up, Get Moving. It's in its 12th year. It involves 25,000 families, and really to encourage people to be physically active. One of the things that is very popular is our bicycle giveaways, because we try to encourage children and families, because we know that in our community, cycling together is important. So that's just some of the things that we do, but there's a lot more.
Awesome. You know, nowadays the term equity or equitable, healthy, resiliency, sustainability, they've all become like buzzwords. As a researcher, it's important for me to contextualize what that means now and to give definitions to it that we can all understand and move forward. I want to hear from you. What does it mean for you personally to live in an equitable, healthy, and resilient community? If you can conceptualize that community, if it already existed, excuse me, what would it look like? Start with you, Dr. Delgado.
Okay, I think that the most important thing to me is that concept at the Alliance that we work for, best health for all, and understanding that it's personalized to the individual. You know, we're working in with NIH with their All of Us initiative, which is really trying to get data about the individual and your health. So I think that would be it. Not only personal health, but access to health. Not only that you have health insurance, but when you come in, that health entity has good data about you as an individual, that they can have both individualized data and national data to help define health for you. It's about being able to make choices. You know, it always used to get me upset when people said, well, poor people don't know how to make choices. And what we did as an experiment one year is we had people try to feed a family of 4 on $5 a day and make sure people were full. And they realized, wow, people who are poor have to make some really tough choices. How can we help them? And I think it would be nice if they didn't have to make those choices, because we're all working together as one community. You know, I always say that rugged individualism is how you build a nation, but connecting to family and friends, that's how you build a country and a culture.
Give her a hand for that. That's amazing. Awesome. Dr. Gowan.
So we believe, as Dr. just said, that if we design a bikeway or a sidewalk or a park in our community, it has to be designed for the least wealthy among us, or the people that have the least access to parks and sidewalks and so on and so forth. And at first we had some discussion about that, and we thought, well, do we need to design one way for the low-income folks and another way for the higher-income folks? And what we found out was exactly what was just said. The low-income folks want the very same thing that the higher income folks want. They want access to parks, they want to be able to walk to church, they want to be able to get a loaf of bread without having to get in a car that they may not afford anyway, may not be able to afford to begin with. And that was validated when we were awarded a choice neighborhood from HUD last year for one of our low-income neighborhoods. And they did a vast amount of surveying door to door of these homes in this area. And the number one thing they wanted were access to bike trails. The second thing they wanted were access to community gardens. And the third thing was improved sidewalks. So we found, and I think it's true in most, I would like to think it's true in most cities, that designing and planning and getting the input from the lowest income among you is going to serve every income level and make it equitable across the board.
That's awesome. Another hand for that. Harriet?
I might go in a little bit of a different direction.
Sure.
Health is obviously hugely important. A hugely important issue, and we all have talked about giving people choices, housing choices and transportation choices. The District of Columbia and a lot of other cities that you are from have experienced, perhaps a lot in just the last decade, a lot of change. And in cities like Nashville that are rapidly growing, I feel like we're not really doing enough to make sure that longtime residents and newcomers are actually intermingling. You know, we live in a time when you can, in every way, tune in just to the people who are exactly like you. And we're not doing enough. I say this as a former city official, you know, to really try to make sure that there are reasons for people who are unlike each other to be able to be getting together. And I think biking and walking and things that you would organize around those activities really do speak broadly to communities. And I think it's a really fertile place to start having those conversations. Because one of the things that troubles me the most is how divisive the dialogues have gotten in our country, and how we are so much more able to see the differences between people than the similarities. And I just think that's really terrible. And our whole notion about what constitutes the American dream is about mobility, right? About the ability to to make a better life for yourself and your children, particularly a better life for the people that come after. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I'm a first-generation American, and I know that sacrifice was part of what I grew up with, and I grew up thinking that I had an obligation. I had to make the sacrifice worthwhile, right? And that. So when I hear people talk about immigration and about how we don't want immigrants in our country, I think that's crazy. That's the whole entire source, of our strength. So transportation is that thing that people come to it for lots of different reasons. Some people do it just for recreation. I do it just for transportation. But people have different reasons for wanting to have these choices. And I think it really is one of those things that can cut across a lot of different groups to bring people together. And I think people do want at least the choice. They might choose to do different things in different circumstances, but I think places are more successful in every way, and people meet more people who aren't exactly like them when you have that broad array of transportation choices, especially great walking facilities, great biking facilities.
Awesome. So you've touched on the importance of social cohesion in the building of equitable, resilient, and healthy communities. We've talked also about lower income, people of color wanting the same things as others. Where does power and influence factor into this? Where and whom should power lie with? Any of you?
I think power lies with everyone here and people. One of the things that gets me very annoyed is when someone said, well, I didn't vote for this person. I said, okay, but you still have a voice, use it. And I think that's what we have to encourage people to do, to write, email, and be active. And I think that is the voice that changes. We were very lucky in Washington, D.C., because we had a mayor who loved to ride his bicycle. And that really helped change things. But you have to get people engaged. You have to get them where they're at. And I think that voting is key. It's a gift that we as Americans have that in many other places they don't have, so we should exercise it. And just because you vote once a year doesn't mean you just sit on your laurels the rest of the year. You got to get up and you got to follow up. And I think you being part of organizations like this is key to that.
Yeah, we had this discussion last night, a few of us. Voting is, of course, important, but it doesn't always lead to the outcomes that some communities are seeking. So what do you say in regards to that? There are people who have been voting for many, many years, yet their reality hasn't changed.
Part of it is...
It stays on, by the way.
Part of this is never to give up. I mean, advocacy, the gentleman before said, it took like 40 years to make change. You have to stay in the fight. Things don't happen overnight. For those of us who have been involved in like women's health, it was only 2 years ago that NIH said you had to do research on female animals. So we have to be in the fight forever, not just vote. You got to follow up. You have to make people accountable. And now it's much easier with email and things because congressional people will only accept emails from people in their district. So please, use your email, send letters, ask. And even if you don't think they're on an issue, you write a short letter. Don't write War and Peace, Write a short letter, 3 sentences. This is important to us, to our families. And this is why we need you to be with us. Believe me, the NRA has a lot of people who write in, and they write short letters. And it's the numbers. So the numbers of people that you can get to be with you, the better it is.
What do you think, Dr. Gower?
I couldn't agree more. I think that if you rest all of your hopes of progress on one particular candidate, whether they win or not, let's say they don't, you can't just stop there and say, okay, well, we're done for another 4 years. It is your job as a leader and as an advocate to change the conversation so you can change their mind. Wasn't it someone that said that a leader is someone who makes you do something that you didn't want to do to begin with? If your candidate did win, they still need your help, because that candidate is maybe an advocate of bicycling and walking, but they're going to need further ammunition. And you have to give them talking points and ammunition in terms of health, in terms of economic development, in terms of equity, in terms of recreation, and everything in between, so that they have the fuel to keep going. And so voting is very important, but it's not the only thing that's important.
Go ahead, Erin.
I really violently agree with my colleagues. I think this is all really great advice. You should be taking notes because it's really, really good advice. I would also say, as a person who's often been in that position where I was ostensibly a decision maker on a lot of key policy issues, I totally needed my friends to be smacking me hard, right, about not doing enough. Because look, plenty of other people were in my office or writing me and saying, hey, stop this horrible bike lane. Stop this. Stop this. This new transit. That's going to change our neighborhood. Don't let these things happen. I needed other people to be saying, absolutely, this is the right thing to do. You need to keep doing it. You're not doing enough. Because, like it or not, most politicians, they have to steer the course somewhere in the middle. So they absolutely need people to constantly be pushing them to do more, even though secretly every time you see your friend who's in the position that they can make decisions, you might give them a big hug, but they really need to hear from you that you're not doing enough and to keep it up and to step it up. The other thing I would say is that we talked already about how we have things in common with other people. We need to grow our coalitions. So every time you understand that, oh, my bike advocacy group has a lot in common with this anti-poverty group, right? Because our intersection is low-cost transportation, right? That helps the anti-poverty group, it helps the bike community. And that there are those connections with all kinds of groups, and we just need to be doing more to broaden them. You need to show up on their issues. They need to show up on your issues, because these things really are interconnected. Nobody here, I know this, nobody here cares only about one issue. Biking and transportation is part of a larger set of things, but you're in a really great position to make those connections with other organizations and to help them understand how advocating on your issue helps them, and for you to do the same in return.
Absolutely. Let's transition to disinvestment in communities. Should the current equitable distribution of bicycle infrastructure take into account past injustices?
No one's going to say no, but
As long as you can defend it.
well,
You
let
know
me.
what? Yeah, I think that you have to look forward. I think you have to look at the communities and say, which communities need to have more infrastructure so they can ride their bicycles, and just put it there. There have been so many injustices in so many areas that we can focus on the past, but like I said, you have to move forward. So go to those communities. Yes, it may be a little harder to build a bike lane where the people don't even have a sidewalk, but you have to start. You have to go there. So I think that part of it is to move forward. What can we do to make it better for everybody? Because we are connected to each other, and we have a responsibility for each other. And that's, grassroots grow together. I love your theme, because that's what it's about, growing together.
You are, good hand. I wouldn't be me if I didn't push back on that.
Okay.
You are a clinical psychologist.
Right.
When I enter your office, how much attention do you pay to my past history?
Past can be very colorful,
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes.
But it's gone.
It's gone?
You can only move forward. So we have to move forward all the time. Recognize the past and
Right.
saying, this is where we have to go, and go there.
Right. Recognition is key. Recognition is key.
I would add to that, I'm a gynecologist.
Gynecologist.
I wouldn't see you personally. But,
You never know.
I know, that's true. That's true. That's true. And I even went to the culturally competent course yesterday.
You're not in Texas.
But I would look at your past history, but I would also craft what I want you to do now based on current scientific evidence, which may not be the same as it was in the past when
Right.
your issues arose. So my view of what's going forward is going to be going forward, and certainly take into account what's in the past, but see if, do you deserve all of the modern things that that you did not get before? And the answer should be yes. That doesn't mean you get more, but it should mean that you have the opportunity to take advantage of those new things. So in my community, a lot of people think, okay, well, we need to fix all the potholes, and then when you're done with all the potholes, then we'll see about sidewalks and bike lanes. And our answer to that is you're never going to finish fixing potholes. That's going to go on forever. So yes, we need to do that, but at the same time, we also may need to make these more modern facilities, sidewalks and protected bike lanes and all of that, available to our people.
Harriet, jump in.
I think it can be very complicated. I know in a lot of the cities that you live in, people have actually pointed to bike lanes as a signifier of coming gentrification. Yes? Is that true? All right. So,
Do you agree or disagree?
well, I would say that any place that gets a lot of investment, especially a lot of transportation investment, is likely to see a lot of private sector investment, and that in turn is likely to raise property values. So the thing is to be prepared for this, and to know that if you want to make sure that displacement, unintentional, right? But if displacement is a consequence of your improvements in a neighborhood, you need to be taking steps to prevent that from happening long before there's anything happening in the physical space. So bike lanes in some ways are the smallest kinds of transportation investments, but they do signal to people that, we're interested in providing more options in this neighborhood. And so you wouldn't want to not put those investments in places where households are low income and might most benefit, but you have to begin by talking to people about what this means. And if for some types of transportation in DC, we started in low-income neighborhoods. Our initial plans for streetcar were to be in Anacostia, and the response to it, I think, was a consequence of maybe not preparing the ground well enough for this conversation and for this investment, was, oh no, you are not going to experiment on this community with some newfangled or old-fangled, depending on who you were talking to, transportation that no other part of the city has, right? So it wasn't viewed positively at all. It was viewed, very much as a negative. So I think conversations are really, really important. And in fact, you are trying to bring change to a neighborhood, not necessarily huge, massive private sector investment, but you are trying to change the transportation options and the safety. And I think that we all need to do a lot better job of forming relationships with grassroots organizations in communities where any of these changes are possible, and where they are leading the change, that is so much to the better.
Thank you. Great. We have two doctors on the panel. My questions to you is, what obligation does the medical profession have or should have in the understanding of the built environment in the building of these cities? We usually say in our environmental justice work that it's not a desktop exercise. However, doctors are prescribing that people walk more, bike more, yet they never step foot in their communities. They don't know the realities of crime there, the lack of walking and bikeable infrastructure. So talk to me about what role you all have in that fight.
I went to the University of Texas Southwestern, of course, a very wonderful medical school, and thanks.
What up?
And there was not one lecture in my day on public health. It was not part of the curriculum. If it happened at Southwestern, it was in some other building where I never went. So graduating, we were all encouraged to go into private practice, and that was the goal. And I did that for a long time. And but as I became involved with public health about 10, 12 years ago, I realized that made me more complete of a physician, because I was speaking to one person at a time, talking to women about, you need to exercise more, you need to lose weight, and so on and so forth. But I had no clue where they went when they left my room. Was there a sidewalk in their neighborhood? Could they get to a park? Could they ride their bike? I had no idea. So I think that physicians need to educate themselves on their communities. They need to get involved. Time is always short in a physician's office, but physicians have families too. They should know where the parks are. They should know where the gaps are in the community. They should care about who got elected to city council, because ultimately who you elect to city council is who's going to determine how to spend the money in your city, not who the president of the United States is. So physicians should play a very important role, and I think a lot of physicians are waking up to that reality even today.
Awesome.
I think healthcare in America is going through thunderous changes these days. And because of that, part of it is that every healthcare provider has to understand the reality of the person they're seeing in their office, where they live. So telling someone to eat more fish when it's too expensive is not a good idea. Telling people to walk where they have no sidewalk is not a good idea. So I think if you're really in tune to the people that you're serving and taking care of, you have an idea of what the limitations are, and you work around that. And I think that is the challenge. It's not a one-size-fits-all. One size fits sometimes most. You know, we have to tailor to the individual. That requires work, it requires time. And I think healthcare is changing in that way, from the medical assistant that you see, to the physician assistant, to the physician, to the nurse practitioner. Everyone in healthcare is changing. And also in healthcare, we're saying health is more than that visit. It's where you live, it's being able to ride, it's being able to take my family on a bicycle ride together, because there's a path for us that's not going to have broken glass. And so I think that part of it is reshaping the way we think of it. But part of it also is, you know, you talked about the importance of getting together. I think people also have to get together within families. I don't necessarily mean your biological families, but as your families of people you care for. And I think that will make us stronger and healthier, and that's what cycling's about to me.
Awesome. I have two quick questions before we open it up to the audience. This next one, there's been many discussions, particularly in the Black community, that the reason why we have not been making the progress we would like to make in terms of bicycle infrastructure, et cetera, is because we're battling symptoms. We're not dealing with the root causes of the injustice, which to many is white supremacy and racism. How do you deal with that? What's your answer? Do you call it like it is? And if so, how do you address it? Go ahead, Harry.
I think that's a question every organization should be asking itself. I find it so interesting, and my colleagues who are in the medical profession, you know, are very familiar with this phenomenon that in every profession that I've looked at, across every kind of sector, there's a term that describes the racial differences in outcomes, right? In health disparities, we might say. You know, we have them in transportation in terms of rates of death and injury for pedestrians. You know, that we have them in in educational outcomes. We have them in every single field, and it's so weird that because it's a different term in every field, we're not calling it what it is, right? Institutional racism. That is the umbrella that we're dealing with. Now, to know it by its name doesn't actually change anything. Right. So figuring out what it is that would make a change. So, for example, I'm no longer the planning director in the District of Columbia, but one of the things I did when I was planning director was change the zoning code to get rid of a lot of parking on the one hand, which was good, but also to and add bike facilities and require bike parking in buildings, but also to allow something called accessory dwelling units.
Right.
In most of your cities, the largest category of land use for residential is single family, and our household sizes are in DC are half of what they were in 1950 because of, you know, the changing demographics and family composition. And even in places where it's not that stark, it's still smaller than it was when most of the neighborhoods you live in were built, right? And that we could absolutely accommodate more families, more households in single-family neighborhoods, which would add diversity and income diversity. And there's a group of us here who want to specifically work to provide housing for low and moderate income households in the very best neighborhoods with the very best schools, right? So I guess what I'm saying is we can't fight it all, but we should be, all of us, thinking about where's the thing, you know, where we could make a difference, where the institutionalization of racism, in most cities it's physical, you know, it's physical, where people live, right, where they can go to school, it's drawn on a map, right? So anything that we can do to change those things, I think, begins to change the outcome. But it's different in every institution and in every place. But I think that is the challenge of our times, to fight this issue.
You all would like to comment? Awesome. Give it up for that.
So my area does not have a large population of African Americans, so I can't really speak personally to that. But I would say a personal story, which is that I did not feel Mexican American until I left my home to go to college in Houston and beyond. And it's not that I was put down or that someone prevented me from doing something, but it's because I realized that I didn't have the options when I was growing up that others did. For instance, there were no AP classes in my high school. Why was that? Did someone consciously make a decision not to teach AP to Hispanic youth in Brownsville? I don't think so. I think it was just something that they didn't think about, or they didn't think we would be interested in. Even today, my husband teaches AP classes at the same high school that I graduated from. Why are fewer Hispanics across the country taking AP classes or earning AP credit? Is that because someone's actually stepping on them? I don't think so. But I think it's that parents and teachers and even the kids themselves don't feel they have a place there. So I see your question is empowering our youth and ourselves to say that we have the rights to everything that everyone else has, and it shouldn't be segregated into one particular group.
I think that what is important is the idea that you don't have to be stepped on to feel that you can't do something. That very often there are institutional things that hold people back, and there are so many isms that in our society, and I'm a clinical psychologist, so I try to explain people because I like people. So even the ones who would want to slit my throat because I'm Hispanic or put me on a boat and put me someplace else, you're still people, and I understand that's you. But I also understand that institutions are made to fulfill the needs of a homogeneous kind of entity that really doesn't exist. That's why we have so many isms, because that average person is not there. So, as a woman, forget it. Most of the health data really doesn't apply to me, except if it's about OBGYN. There's more to me than that. I have a lot more. I have a heart, I have lungs, I have everything else. But, that's where the focus is. So I think that part of it is working to change institutions and not giving up. The role of an advocacy person is to make change. And that means you got to be tenacious, you got to be there, and each one of you, the fact that you're here, I hope you leave all, ready to go back to your communities and fight even more, and talk to your friends. Also, don't neglect them, because that's what happens. Oh, they're my friends. They need your support, but they also need you in their face. So I think that there's a lot of work to do, but institutions we have to work to change, because there are a lot of problems with how they operated historically, but I believe the future is bright. I believe in America working together, not to be fighting with each other. That doesn't help us grow. So I think that's where we're going to go.
Awesome. All right, one last question quickly before we open it up to the audience, because trust me, there will be questions. Each of you are elected mayor tomorrow of a major city. You are approached by a dock and a dockless bike share provider. You can only choose one system. Which one and why?
Is this like a trick question?
No one is watching except the whole world right now, so you can only choose one and why. Play my game.
Well, I'm from Texas, and I understand that Dallas is having a lot of trouble with dockless bike systems. So I'm going to say I'm going to go with a dock system, only because perhaps parts of my state are not quite ready for the dockless system. Did I answer correctly, Robin?
He'll chat with you about that later. He doesn't want to say anything yet. All right. A little more complicated. All right, Harry, please don't say hybrid, dock, or dockless.
Can I say electric?
All
right.
Sure.
Okay, so I would want a dockless system because at least the anecdotal evidence, and you should tell me if this is right or not, is that the riders are more diverse. And that makes sense because to get the best price in a docked system, the way the pricing structure is in most of the country, that you pay a hefty fee, a one-time fee annually, and it turns out that's a real hurdle for some households to be able to make that. Now they might, but it's easy to kind of pay the low fee on a per ride basis, and so it seems in Washington, where we're doing a huge dockless bike share experiment, that it's having an effect of getting more riders to ride. And also, what I like about bike infrastructure in general, and it would be particularly true for dockless, this is an area where cities can experiment, right? You can't really experiment with highways. Should it be here? Should it not be here? We can move it if we don't like it. You can totally do that with bike facilities, and particularly if you start with dockless, right? So you might want to have some rules about where not to put the bikes, but other than that, I think it's a relatively low cost, low risk way for you to look at trying to experiment with transportation infrastructure, because if there's one thing cities need to learn to do is to experiment and to make mistakes and to occasionally fail.
Awesome. All right, Dr. Delgado.
You
have the deciding vote here.
It would depend what state I lived in.
No.
Yes.
You are the mayor. You're the mayor of Washington, D.C. Let's say that. You have a decision to make.
Well, we're advanced, and in D.C., I would go with dockless. Yes,
Okay,
definitely.
why?
Because I think for all the reasons that it does, it's more equitable across the board and things like that. But I would also do something to encourage employers. I would give a tax benefit to employers who
Nice.
paid the fee for their employees.
Nice.
And Doctor, I will just point out there is a mayor's race coming up here in
There's
Washington.
one coming up. All right. Give them a hand. We're going to open it. Give them a hand. Awesome. All right. Now we have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. Please stand up, identify yourself quickly, and ask your question. Open.
Are we going to use the...
Here are the microphones back here. Great. Line up, please, if you have questions. Start lining up. Let's go.
Okay, this is on. So we talked about the distribution of power and how we have to get our communities out to vote and send emails and be engaged. In low-income and disadvantaged communities, these people are working 2 and 3 jobs and can't feed and house their communities. Yet they're suffering most of the inequities. So how can we say that it's easy that we're just going to get out there and vote and engage when they're just feeding their families? So there's got to be more of a solution than that.
Quickly.
Well, I think part of what you do is you make it accessible to people, and just like people know how to knock on people's doors in order to get their vote, you also have to knock on their doors to get their opinion and to get them out. And I think there are many communities which are experimenting with other things to get people to vote. Low-income people vote, low-income people volunteer. There are a lot of myths about low-income people.
I agree. I think it's the community's responsibility to teach everyone why it's important to vote, because it is, whether you're low income or not, it is. And if they don't understand the importance of voting, then they won't find that accessible area on their way home from their 2 jobs to vote.
Question over here, yes.
Hello, my name is Lark Lowe from Bella Bloomfield in New Jersey. How can we start having a conversation that doesn't focus on people of color deficits and starts to focus on the actual act of oppression and exclusion for funding for people of color-run organizations and communities? For example, redlining actively excluded people of color communities for investment. So like Dr. Delgado, your study was discussed how people of color do like to ride bikes, they do want to walk, so we have that data so we can stop having that conversation. So how do we change the narrative so that we can actually get money so we don't get $80,000 just for education, while the actual, shovel in the ground where it goes to predominantly white and middle class communities?
That goes again to the idea of getting your people elected and making them accountable. Because the money that's one way. Another way is thinking about corporations who are nearby who may want to adopt something. I think that we have to try different methods, and one of the things that gives me hope is young people getting very politically active. In this last campaign, presidential campaign, we had a lot of people who went out and were active, and I'm hoping that that will continue. If you're not out there, don't give up, because they say no this time, you just keep going. And part of it is foundations. It's not just government, it's also foundations have historically given very few dollars to other than the major organizations, okay? I don't like to talk about African Americans, Hispanics, Asian, Native Americans, LGBTQ as people who are people of color. We're people, and we live in communities, and we need the same kind of things everyone else does. And one way or another, we're going to get it. But part of it is making our voice heard.
All right. Over here.
So cyclists many times see themselves as victims. They're the vulnerable travelers. They're at risk. Everything happens to them. Terrible things happen as they travel. However, many cyclists violate individuals with disabilities' ability to travel from place to place. Bikes are put in accessible ways and locations. How would those bikeless or the stationless bike shares be ticketed or violated if their bikes inhibit the accessibility of a person with a disability using a wheelchair or device or who is blind?
Got it. Harriet?
I think you have to find the company. You have to sort of say the rules. I mean, we're doing this experiment here in the district. I think it's 6 or 9 months. It ends in April, ostensibly. And I just got my first piece of educational literature from one of the companies after they've already been operating 5 months, saying just what you're saying, don't block sidewalks, right? Don't block intersections. Be kind of sensible about where you put the bikes. But yeah, I think you have to hold the companies accountable for this, because part of the deal about the dockless bike share is that it's really hard to identify the users, right?
Right. Yes, sir.
We were fascinated and entertained by the last question about dockless versus docked, and we got an answer from everyone on the panel except one, Dr. Brown.
That's because, yeah. There's a reason I'm moderating. I get a chance to ask the questions, not answer them. It depends. It's contextual. Give me a city. Give me a city. Give me a city. Give me a context, and I'll answer your question.
Oh boy, here we go. All right.
If I'm the mayor of New Brunswick. Oh, okay. Give me one then. Hurry up.
Atlanta. Mayor of Washington, D.C.
Atlanta, I would go to dockless system. Because of the equity implication potentially, and the fact that it's so sprawled, people are traveling from all over the region to get in and out of the city, so therefore you need the flexibility in that system. And then also it will cost less to do that. Many of the dockless systems are going to cities saying we'll do this for free. It's an experiment, no cost to the city. Atlanta could use a no cost to the city sort of approach. So I would say, a dockless system in Atlanta.
Let me give a corollary to the question.
All right, please hurry up, because you've already been moderator, so
All
speed
right,
up.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Would you say it's too early to cast judgment in this experiment? We hear about, is it too early to say whether dockless is successful or not going to be a success? Because it's really been less than a year, hasn't it, in the United States?
Correct. We're not casting a vote in perpetuity here. We're just giving a context and, like, ideally, what would you choose now? But to your point, I feel that it is too early. Yes, over here.
Hi, to echo my West Coast colleagues' kind of comments earlier, I think when we were talking about folks who can vote, I think if we're going to be having a panel on thinking holistically and thinking equitably, we need to remember that not everybody can vote. And so we also need to keep in mind and do better with folks who obviously cannot vote. So it's not a question, it's more of a comment. So.
Noted. Thank you. Over here.
Similarly, I have to say something to that. Even though people can't vote, there are a lot of people who are here legally who can't vote, but they still live in a community, and they can still write to that person who's supposed to represent that community.
Right. Good point.
We shouldn't say illegally. Again, a discussion on thinking holistically and equitably, those words should probably not be said.
I think that you should still, even if you have something to say, you should send a correspondence, a letter, whatever you can. Because people don't sort their emails by whether you're here legally or illegally, okay? And I think that if you have a concern, you should raise it. Because if you're in a community and you're working, living, contributing to that community, you need to make certain that people hear what you have to say.
Well, she made a point that she doesn't think that in the context of our discussion, that term should be used, illegal. What is your position on that? Because everything here is debatable?
I think that that's a very, it depends what we're talking about. If it's about health, we want everyone to be healthy because it's for the health of our community that everyone who lives in a community be healthy.
Well, we're talking about calling people illegal immigrants, specifically.
Well, you know, I don't use that terminology. I don't think it's helpful.
Okay, over here.
Similarly, I have more sort of feedback than I do a question, which is from listening to...
Where are you from, quickly?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, all right. All right, let's go.
Right, you're not going to be so happy with me in a minute.
All right.
So what I have to say is that, unfortunately, I'm really bad at remembering people's names on panel, my second and third ladies. I'm just finding a lot of things that you say extremely problematic as representatives of women of color on this panel to a largely not people of color audience. I just want to give some perspective, which is, one, I hear a lot of the language you're using, like your rebuttal to the young lady about the language we use, and basically you're just repeating the things that racist white people say. And as the women of color on this panel, I need the people in the audience to understand that just because some of us of color are saying this does not mean it's what's good. Like, to not acknowledge and just say vote, 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 and not acknowledge disenfranchisement like we don't know that's a thing is not okay. To not act as though we don't know that undocumented people are part of our communities and not acknowledge how they are not able to give that vote and that letter or even read or speak the same language to talk to their representatives is not okay, and I expect more of that from degreed women. I hear you all speaking of I hear the perspectives from what you speak when you say, well, I didn't feel like a Mexican until whatever overt racism didn't happen to me, so racism isn't happening institutionally. That's problematic. I hear that as I am a person of color, but I'm not a black person of color, and throughout this I've heard black people have these more problematic ways of presenting their issues, and me, I'm going to separate myself as a person of color who's not black because it's not as problematic to white people. And the last thing I hear is, we're all people, we're all people, we're all people. We all know we're all people. We all know that we have differences, and the reason that race is valid, gender is valid, and all these things is because, unfortunately, the institutional racism put into place by white people, not saying all white people are bad for anybody who don't know me.
5 seconds.
Is to say, we're all the same and it's not an issue. And it's definitely an issue. Please don't invalidate. Don't invalidate with your platform right here. That's all I got to say.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, sir, over here, one more question after him or comment. Yes, sir.
Hi. Well, I've just listening to the discussion that we've been having, and we're talking about holistic, healthy communities and resilient communities, equitability. I think that's a goal that all of us try to access, would like to access, would like to see happen. People that look like me have had a platform to talk about this. We've used our privilege to talk about this for a very long time. A lot of the direction that multimodal infrastructure has taken is based upon the view of the world that we have. It is equally valid in all communities, and if our vision is the one that's implemented, then it does tend to lead to the gentrification to which you were referring earlier. So my question is, how do we shift the conversation so that each of the communities involved and each of the different complexions of the communities that are involved contribute their vision and their energy toward building this infrastructure in a way that preserves their communities rather than allowing it to be a displacement, gentrification, and eventual loss of that facility?
All right, anyone want to address that?
I mean, that's a long, it's a whole seminar, that answer, but the basic issue is you have to work in the communities where you're even contemplating doing an investment and thinking about what their needs are, and you have to also recognize, if you're from the government, that sometimes you're not the best entity to lead this effort. You know, you need to work with community organizations. You might need to ask people a question way before you're talking about infrastructure, which is, what do you need? What are the needs in this community? What are the aspirations in this community? And then try to see what you can potentially be doing to help.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that what we do is we actually go to communities and talk to the leaders there and talk to people in communities, not necessarily the leaders, people who live there, and ask them what they want. And when you ask people what they want, there are some voices that may be louder than the others, but you have to listen to all the voices. And when you listen to all the voices, they may tell you, the bike is not my priority right now. And you have to meet people where they're at and meet their needs first before you say, oh, we're going to do this great thing for you. I think that's nothing anybody would do who wants to be successful.
Let's get the question. Yeah.
Okay.
We only have time for one more question, but we're not going anywhere. So go ahead.
Okay, this is more of a comment, but I recognize that there's two groups that are not being mentioned, and that's the indigenous community. How are we working with them? Indigenous communities, both recognized and unrecognized, so sovereign nations. And then secondly, there's a lot of communities that are being displaced that have not ever had that trust in government. Coming from war-torn countries, often you're not given that trust in government, do not understand the political system, or are overworked. How are we engaging them?
Right.
So in my area, the Mexican American population in our area is highly related, indigenous to the Mexican Indians. And so we are answering that question in our area by including everyone. We have not seen displacement in our area, but I would think that the best way to guard against that is inclusion and empowerment.
Give these ladies a hand, please. Give them a hand. Now give yourselves a hand. But yes, I understood. I got the call that I had to end it.
Before that, there was a question that was asked, but there were no panel responses. All of the other questions received panel responses.
Well, they responded to, I guess, what they perceived to be a question.
So first of all, I think that different people frame the world in different ways. And for me to focus on things of the past don't help. So I focus on the future. I fight with people all the time to try to move things forward. And I think that part of it is recognizing the strengths of each community and moving forward. I do not see my non-Hispanic white colleagues now as oppressors. They have their own history that they have to live with. But I see them as people that I can work with, even the ones who don't want to work with me. So I think that part of it is you just have to move forward. Being from Brooklyn, I was raised in what was then called a multicultural society, okay? And everyone celebrated each person, and each community was very separate. And although that might have been nice, that's not good. I think we have to work together. And if we don't work together, we will not be able to be where we need to be in the future to really address the tough problems that are facing our world. So that's my response to that. I think that as a Hispanic woman, I have gone through all sorts of stuff. And I have to say from my colleague here, coming from Brownsville, a place which is 95% Mexican American, of course she's not going to realize she's Mexican American until she leaves, because there everyone is like her, you know. So I think that your community defines who you are and how you grow up. And I think we have to also not just define our own community, but reach out to other communities that we may not know and may not have experienced, and that's what will make us do the right things, being about bike lanes or whatever. We have to reach out to each other, because building barriers is not going to be what makes us stronger and healthier. And I think that's tough, because it's easier to be on either side fighting with each other. It's much harder to reach out and say, I really want to work with you. I know that your family
2
did
seconds.
horrible things to us, but we're going to move to a new place.
Thank you. So I first of all, give it up to the League of American Bicyclists, Bill, and all for doing this panel. What you see today, the discussion that has taken place, is sort of indicative of the thirst we all have to just keep it real and to have a discussion that is not always popular, but we're able to address ourselves and be heard. And today that happened. We didn't have agreement on every issue, but we at least heard it, we talked about it, and we are going to move forward while also respecting the past. So thank you. If you have questions, I'm sure these ladies are available, but give yourselves a hand and give them a hand. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Everyone, really important conversation, and I'm sorry we have to end it, but we're going to be moving directly right now. Sessions start in like 2 minutes. So you know, they're not going to start without you. But thank you very much for being a part of this, and onward.